Imagine a world blanketed in crisp white snow, where time slowed to the rhythm of crackling fireplaces, and families found solace in simple joys amid changing America. Welcome to Remember When USA, exploring the winter wonders and cozy moments of 1950s to 1960s America.
The winters of the 1950s and 1960s in America were more than just a season of cold weather. They were a profound pause in the rapid transformation of a nation still recovering from the shadows of World War II and stepping cautiously into the uncertainties of the Cold War era. As the country experienced an unprecedented economic boom, with gross domestic product growing at an average rate of over 4% annually throughout the 1950s, families moved into newly built suburban homes financed by the GI Bill. These neighborhoods, such as Levittown in New York and Pennsylvania, became the backdrop for winter scenes that many baby boomers and members of the silent generation remember with deep affection. Snowfall, often heavy in the Northeast and Midwest, with annual averages exceeding 30 inches in cities like Chicago and Buffalo, turned ordinary lawns into magical landscapes, muffling the sounds of the outside world and drawing people closer together. In my unique perspective, these snowy winters served as a form of collective psychological therapy for a generation marked by trauma. Veterans returning from the battlefields of Europe and the Pacific carried invisible wounds, and the constant threat of nuclear conflict during the Cold War, exemplified by school duck and cover drills introduced in 1951, created an undercurrent of anxiety. Snow days, when schools closed unexpectedly due to blizzards, offered a rare reprieve, allowing families to stay indoors and reconnect in ways that the busy post-war lifestyle often prevented. Fathers, many of whom had experienced the harsh winters of wartime Europe, shoveled driveways with a sense of purpose, turning physical labor into an act of protection for their families. Mothers, who had contributed to the war effort in factories, now channeled their energy into creating warm, inviting homes, preparing meals that filled the air with comforting aromas. Yet this idyllic picture was not universal. While white middle-class families in the suburbs enjoyed central heating and well-stocked pantries, African-American families in urban areas or the rural South often faced inadequate housing and heating, exacerbating the hardships of winter under the weight of Jim Crow segregation. Immigrant communities, including those from Italy, Poland, and Scandinavia, brought their own traditions of winter survival, blending them with American customs to create hybrid celebrations of the season. The baby boom, reaching its peak with over 4 million births per year in the late 1950s, meant that homes were filled with children whose laughter echoed through snow-covered streets, providing a sense of hope and renewal for parents who had known darker times. Deeper analysis reveals how winter mirrored the societal shifts of the era. Rural Americans moving to cities and suburbs in record numbers, over 20 million between 1950 and 1960, carried memories of farm winters where snow meant isolation and hard labor on frozen fields. In contrast, suburban winters fostered community, with neighbors helping each other dig out cars or sharing hot drinks after shoveling.
Gender roles were prominently displayed. Boys were encouraged to engage in rough outdoor play, building character through physical challenges, while girls often helped indoors, learning domestic skills that would define their expected roles. However, these norms were not absolute. Many girls joined snowball fights, and boys helped with indoor chores, showing the subtle flexibility within conformity. The psychological impact of winter cannot be overstated. Snow's ability to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary provided a natural antidote to the era's anxieties. Children free from school on snow days experienced a sense of wonder that modern weather forecasting has largely eliminated. Families gathered around radios or early television sets, listening to weather reports with anticipation, hoping for that magical announcement of closure. This unpredictability added excitement to life, teaching patience and appreciation for nature's power. Economically, winter stimulated specific industries. Sales of wool coats, sleds, and ice skates surged, contributing to the consumer culture that defined the post-war period. Department stores like Sears and Montgomery Ward featured winter gear prominently in their catalogs, which arrived in homes like treasured gifts themselves. For working-class families, winter brought additional challenges, with heating costs straining budgets, but also opportunities for community support through church drives and neighborhood assistance. Reflecting on racial aspects, winter highlighted stark inequalities. While white suburban children enjoyed new sleds under Christmas trees that lingered into January, black families in northern cities like Detroit or Chicago often made do with handmade toys and second-hand coats, their winter joy tempered by the ongoing struggle for civil rights. Stories from the era recount how snow provided brief equality on public sledding hills, where children of different backgrounds played together before returning to segregated schools. In comparison to today, winters of the 1950s and 1960s were generally colder and snowier in many regions, with less influence from climate change. The Great Blizzard of 1966, dumping over 20 inches in parts of the Northeast, created memories that lasted lifetimes. These seasons taught generations to find beauty in stillness, a lesson particularly relevant in our fast-paced 2025 world of constant connectivity. Snow's blanket not only covered the ground, but also, temporarily, the divisions and fears of the time, allowing moments of pure, shared humanity. The cultural significance extended to media. Radio programs and early TV shows featured winter themes, with commercials for hot chocolate and winter tires reinforcing the season's coziness. Families decorated homes with leftover Christmas lights, extending the holiday glow into January and February. For many, winter was a time of reflection, looking back on the year's achievements and forward to spring's promise. This post-war winter context set the stage for the specific activities and moments that defined the era's charm. As we delve deeper, we'll explore how outdoor play in the snow built character and community, and how indoor coziness provided emotional nourishment in an age of rapid change. These memories, preserved in photographs and stories, continue to warm hearts decades later, reminding us of a time when winter's wonders were simple, profound, and deeply human.
Outdoor winter activities were the beating heart of snowy days in 1950s and 1960s America, transforming ordinary neighborhoods into vibrant playgrounds filled with laughter and adventure. Children bundled in wool coats, mittens knitted by grandmothers, and rubber boots ventured out to build snowmen with carrot noses and coal eyes, a tradition that felt timeless but gained new popularity in the post-war era as families had more leisure time. Sledding was perhaps the most beloved activity, with classic flexible flyer sleds, first patented in 1889 but mass-produced and affordable in the 1950s, becoming icons of childhood freedom. Kids raced down neighborhood hills, steering with their feet, experiencing thrills that required no batteries or screens. Snowball fights organized spontaneously, with teams forming across streets, teaching strategy, teamwork, and fair play. Forts built from packed snow became bases for epic battles that lasted hours, fostering imagination and physical resilience. Ice skating on frozen ponds or community rinks brought together generations, with parents teaching children to glide while holding hands. In rural areas, families skied cross-country on homemade equipment, while urban kids found joy in city parks. My perspective, these activities were more than play. They were character-building exercises in an era emphasizing self-reliance. Boys and girls participated equally in many games, subtly challenging gender norms, even as society pushed traditional roles. For minorities, public parks offered rare spaces of integration, though segregation limited access in the South. Deeper analysis shows how outdoor winter play countered suburban isolation, creating organic community bonds. In the 1950s, with television still new, children spent more time outside, building physical and social skills lost in today's indoor-focused childhood. Snow's abundance, with major blizzards like 1958's creating 20-inch accumulations, allowed for extended play periods. Compared to 2025, where warmer winters and safety concerns reduce outdoor time, these eras had purer joy in nature. Anecdotes include kids walking miles to best hills or family skating parties with thermoses of soup.
When snow kept families indoors, cozy moments became precious memories that warmed the heart long after the thaw. Fireplaces were the centerpiece, crackling with logs fathers chopped or bought, providing not just heat but a focal point for gathering. Mothers prepared hot cocoa from scratch, using Hershey's cocoa powder, popularized in 1950s ads, topped with marshmallows that melted into creamy delight, a treat that symbolized comfort in uncertain times. Families huddled around radios, listening to shows like The Lone Ranger or music programs featuring Elvis or the Beatles in the 1960s, sharing stories that bridged generations. Board games like Monopoly, with sales booming to millions in the 1950s, provided hours of entertainment, teaching economics and negotiation in fun ways. Early television brought shows like Leave It to Beaver, 1957 to 1963, reinforcing family ideals while offering escape. These rituals offered emotional nourishment, with women finding creative outlets in domestic arts amid feminine mystique frustrations. Baking cookies, sugar cookies shaped like snowflakes, allowed mothers to express love, while fathers read bedtime stories from books like The Night Before Christmas, even in winter. For minorities, home was sanctuary. African American families gathered for soul food and stories of resilience.
Deeper, indoor coziness countered Cold War fears, providing stability. During the 1966 blizzard, families stuck indoors played cards for days, strengthening bonds. In 1950s, radio specials lingered into winter, with Bing Crosby's voice filling homes. Gender roles, women managed household warmth, but many joined games, showing empowerment. Racial aspects, in segregated areas, Black families used winter for community meetings, blending coziness with activism. Economic, affordable heating from post-war innovations made coziness accessible for middle class, but poor relied on coal stoves. Compared to 2025, where screens dominate, these analog evenings fostered deeper connections. Psychological studies from the era note indoor play reduced winter depression. In 2025, with warmer winters, we miss this forced downtime.
As we reach the conclusion of our journey through the winter wonders of 1950s and 1960s America, it is essential to step back and examine the broader societal context in which these snowy days and cozy moments unfolded. Winter in this era was not merely a season of picturesque landscapes and childhood joy. It was a mirror reflecting the profound contradictions of post-war American society, a time of unprecedented prosperity juxtaposed with lingering inequalities, a period of domestic tranquility overshadowed by global anxieties, and an age of conformity that both comforted and constrained. In my view, these winters encapsulated the duality of the American dream, a blanket of snow that beautified the landscape while concealing the cracks beneath, offering warmth to some and hardship to others, and teaching lessons in resilience that remain profoundly relevant in our 2025 world of rapid change and digital disconnection. First, let us consider the economic and social contradictions that winter laid bare. The post-war boom, with its soaring GDP and suburban expansion, created a middle-class idol for many white families. Homes equipped with oil furnaces or coal stoves provided reliable heat, and the availability of consumer goods, from electric blankets introduced in the 1950s to instant hot cocoa mixes, made winter coziness accessible to millions. Yet this comfort was not evenly distributed. Working-class families, particularly in older urban housing stock, often struggled with inadequate insulation and high heating costs, leading to fuel poverty that forced difficult choices between warmth and food. In rural areas, especially in the South, many homes lacked central heating altogether, relying on wood stoves that required constant tending. The winter of 1957 to 1958, known for its severity, highlighted these disparities when fuel shortages in some regions left thousands shivering. Racial inequalities amplified these challenges. Under Jim Crow laws still in force until the mid-1960s, African American families in the South faced segregated and inferior housing, with many living in drafty shacks that offered little protection against cold. In northern cities like Chicago and Detroit, where the Great Migration had brought millions of black families seeking better opportunities, redlining confined them to overcrowded apartments with unreliable heat. Winter illnesses such as pneumonia disproportionately affected minority communities due to these conditions. Yet within these hardships, resilience flourished.
Black churches often served as warming centers, hosting gatherings where stories, gospel music, and shared meals provided emotional and physical warmth. These winter assemblies became spaces for early civil rights organizing, blending coziness with activism, a powerful counter-narrative to the dominant white suburban ideal portrayed in media. Gender dynamics added another layer of complexity. Women, celebrated as homemakers in the era's cultural narrative, bore the brunt of winter's indoor demands. Managing the household during snow days meant endless cycles of cooking, cleaning, and child-minding, often in isolation as husbands commuted to work. The feminine mystique, as Betty Friedan would articulate in 1963, found its winter expression in the pressure to create perfect cozy homes while suppressing personal ambitions. However, winter also offered subtle empowerment. Snowbound days allowed women to engage in creative pursuits like knitting, quilting, or letter writing, activities that built networks through circle letters or neighborhood coffee clutches. Cookie swaps, emerging in the 1950s, became early forms of female social entrepreneurship, where women exchanged recipes and support, laying groundwork for the feminist consciousness-raising groups of the 1970s. For men, winter presented different pressures. The expectation to be the family provider meant braving harsh conditions to get to work, even during blizzards, while also performing manly tasks like snow removal and firewood chopping. Veterans, many suffering from undiagnosed PTSD, found therapeutic value in these physical labors, channeling wartime discipline into domestic protection. However, the era's rigid masculinity left little room for emotional expression, with winter's isolation sometimes exacerbating mental health struggles that went unaddressed until decades later. The Cold War cast its longest shadow over winter life. Duck and cover drills, practiced in schools even during snow days, reminded children of nuclear threats, making the warmth of home a psychological fortress. Media reinforced this, with television specials portraying ideal families gathered safely indoors while the outside world remained dangerous. Snow's muffling effect became metaphorical, quieting not just sounds, but also open discussion of fears. Yet winter also provided escapism. Radio dramas and early TV offered fantasy worlds where good triumphed, offering hope amid uncertainty. Culturally, winter traditions evolved from earlier American practices, but gained new meaning in the post-war context. The extension of Christmas lights into January and February, made possible by affordable electric strings, created winter wonderlands that prolonged holiday cheer. Community events like winter carnivals or ice sculpture contests in northern towns fostered civic pride, countering the atomization of suburban life. For immigrant families, winter became a time of cultural fusion. Scandinavian Americans maintained saunas or lutefisk traditions, while Italian families gathered for feasts featuring homemade wine allowed under post-prohibition laws. The environmental aspect, often overlooked in nostalgia, is crucial when comparing to today. Winters of the 1950s and 1960s were generally colder, with more consistent snowfall due to natural climate variability and less human-induced warming. Major storms like the 1966 blizzard or the 1958 nor'easter created memorable disruptions that brought communities together. In contrast, 2025 winters in many regions are milder, with reduced snowfall attributed to climate change. Average snow cover in the U.S. has declined 10 to 20% since the 1970s. this loss of winter magic affects not just recreation, but mental health, as seasonal affective disorder becomes more prevalent without the bright reflective quality of snow. The legacy of these winters lies in their teaching of appreciation for simplicity and presence. In an era before constant connectivity, snow days forced genuine interaction. Board games required eye contact, storytelling demanded listening, and shared chores built teamwork. These experiences shaped baby boomers' values of resilience and community, qualities that helped them navigate the turbulent 1970s and beyond. For the silent generation, winter memories often evoked pre-war simplicity, a touchstone of stability. In 2025, as we face our own challenges, digital isolation, political division, climate anxiety, the winters of 1950s and 1960s offer profound lessons. The forced slowing of snow days reminds us to unplug and connect authentically. The community spirit of neighbors helping with shoveling suggests ways to rebuild social bonds in fragmented times. The resilience of marginalized communities during harsh winters inspires hope amid current inequalities. Moreover, the era's winter coziness challenges us to create intentional warmth in a world of streaming entertainment and remote work. Perhaps we can revive traditions like family game nights or letter writing during dark evenings. The environmental message is urgent. As snow becomes rarer, we must preserve what remains and mitigate climate change to protect future generations' winter wonders. Ultimately, these winters were flawed yet beautiful reflections of America, prosperous yet unequal, anxious yet hopeful, conformist yet resilient. They remind us that true warmth